You have $100,000 in the bank, and 12 months from now, it's completely gone. No gambling, no scam, no bad investment, just life, hitting you exactly the way it hits millions of ordinary Americans every single year. What you're about to hear isn't a horror story about reckless billionaires or drug addicts. This is the story of a regular person, someone with a steady job, a decent home, and a savings account they spent nearly a decade building, and the exact steps that took them from $100,000 to zero. Every level, every decision, every gut punch. Because the thing nobody tells you is this: financial ruin doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up quietly, one small compromise at a time, until one day you look at your bank account and wonder how you got here. Let's walk through it. Level 1. The illusion of stability. $100,000 in the bank. Meet someone who did everything right. They graduated, got a job, skipped the big vacations, brown bagged their lunch for years. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's legendary business partner, once said that reaching your first $100,000 is the hardest financial milestone of your life. He was right. Research shows that if you save $650 a month at a 7% annual return, it takes roughly 9.5 years to reach that six-figure mark. That's nearly a decade of discipline and sacrifice. So when you finally hit $100,000, something shifts. You feel safe. You feel arrived. You've got maybe 3 to 4 years of living expenses sitting in your account, or so you tell yourself. You loosen up a little. The budget gets a little more flexible. You upgrade the car. You allow yourself a few things you denied yourself for years. This is where the first crack appears. Not in the bank account, but in the mindset. Because the moment you believe you're secure is often the exact moment you stop being careful. And life is watching. Life is patient. Level 2. The first hit. The emergency that wasn't supposed to happen. It starts with something ordinary. A $4,200 car transmission. A root canal that insurance barely covers. A furnace that dies in January when it's 18 degrees outside. These aren't catastrophes, they're just Tuesday. But according to Bankrate's 2026 Emergency Savings Report, 59% of Americans don't have enough saved to cover a $1,000 emergency. You, though, you do. You dip into the savings, you pull out $4,200. You tell yourself you'll put it back next month. You don't put it back next month. Then the next thing happens. There's always a next thing. A medical copay that runs to $800. A flight home for a family emergency. A leak in the roof that turns into a $6,500 repair because it's been draining into the walls for 2 years and you didn't know. Before you've done anything reckless, before you've spent a single dollar on something frivolous, your $100,000 is already down to $87,000. And it happened in under a year. Here's what nobody warns you about. Emergencies don't come one at a time. They cluster. They pile up. And every time you reach into that savings account, you tell yourself it's temporary. And it always feels temporary, right up until it isn't. Level 3, the lifestyle creep you can't see coming. Down to $70,000. You're still employed. You're still paying your bills. To the outside world, you look completely fine. But quietly, your spending has shifted in ways you haven't noticed yet. You got a raise 2 years ago and upgraded your apartment. You're paying $1,950 a month in rent instead of $1,400. You started getting food delivered most nights because your schedule got busier. You've got 4 subscriptions you barely use. You replaced your phone when you didn't need to. Economists call this lifestyle inflation, the phenomenon where every increase in income triggers a nearly equal increase in spending. And it is nearly invisible while it's happening. You're not making bad decisions, you're making normal decisions. The problem is that normal decisions, stacked on top of each other, compound just like compound interest, except in the wrong direction. And here's the number that should stop you cold. The U.S. national savings rate sits at just 4.6% of disposable income. That means on average, Americans are spending 95 cents out of every dollar they bring home. Your $100,000 is no longer growing. It's covering the gap between what you earn and what you've allowed yourself to spend. And you're still 10 years from retirement. Level 4. The credit card trap. Savings drop to $55,000. Then comes the month where your paycheck just doesn't stretch far enough. Maybe a big bill landed. Maybe your hours got cut. Maybe you just had one of those months. So you put $1,200 on the credit card. Just this once. just to bridge the gap. You'll pay it off next month. But next month brings its own problems. And then the month after that. Before you realize what's happening, you're carrying $8,000 in credit card debt at an average interest rate somewhere north of 20%. As of early 2026, credit card debt in America has hit an all-time record of $1.28 trillion, and more than 111 million Americans are now carrying a balance from month to month without paying it off in full. You are not alone. But being in good company here is not a comfort. At 20% interest, that $8,000 in credit card debt costs you roughly $1,600 a year just in interest. Money that evaporates and produces nothing. You're now using your savings to cover the gap between your income and your growing debt obligations. The $100,000 is draining from both ends, emergencies pulling from one side, lifestyle from the other, and interest devouring the middle. You're down to $55,000. And the real crisis hasn't even started yet. Level 5. The job loss. Everything changes overnight. Then comes the pink slip, or the layoff email, or the 11:30 a.m. meeting with HR that you knew, somehow, you always know, was bad news before you even walked in. Job loss is the single most powerful financial destabilizer in American life. Research from the Brookings Institution found that workers who lost jobs during the Great Recession saw their earnings cut nearly in half within 2 years, dropping from roughly $43,700 a year down to about $23,000. And those were the workers who found new jobs. The ones who didn't had it worse. So now you're dipping into your savings every single month just to survive. Rent, $1,950. Car payment, $420. Insurance, utilities, groceries, minimum credit card payments, and you're burning through $3,500 to $4,500 a month while income sits at zero or near zero. Your $55,000 starts disappearing at a terrifying pace. $55,000 becomes $43,000, then $31,000, then $22,000. Meanwhile, the job search takes longer than you expected, because it always does. Because the market never opens up exactly when you need it to, and with every month that passes, the panic gets louder, the options get narrower, and the decisions get more desperate. Level 6, the medical wild card, down to $10,000. And then, because this is America, someone in the family gets sick. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's your kid. Maybe it's a diagnosis that came out of nowhere and requires a procedure that costs $14,000 out of pocket after your COBRA insurance lapses because you couldn't keep up with the payments. A Commonwealth Fund survey found that 72 million Americans are either struggling to pay medical bills or are still paying off medical debt they already incurred. Medical bills are among the leading triggers of personal bankruptcy in the United States each year. So you do what millions of Americans do when they're out of options and out of cash. You tap the 401k. You call it a hardship withdrawal. The IRS calls it that too, but they still hit you with a 10% early withdrawal penalty on top of the income taxes you owe on every dollar you pull out. So if you pull out $15,000 to cover that medical bill, you might walk away with $10,500 after penalties and taxes. You're paying a premium to access money you earned and saved with your own hands, simply because the timing is wrong. Your savings account is now in the low 5 figures, maybe $10,000, maybe a little less, and you can feel it, that specific kind of terror that comes not from losing everything, but from watching the number shrink to the point where you can see the bottom. Level 7, losing the house, the final domino. You've been making the mortgage payment last, prioritizing it above everything else, because losing the house means losing everything. But the math doesn't care about your priorities. 3 missed mortgage payments and the bank's attorneys begin the formal foreclosure process. Under federal law, lenders must wait at least 120 days before initiating foreclosure. But once that clock starts, the timeline moves fast. In many states, the process can be completed in as little as 6 months. And when the house goes, it doesn't just take your shelter. It takes your credit score. It takes your sense of stability. It takes the one asset you believed would always be there. This is the level that most people never imagined reaching when they were sitting comfortably at $100,000. It feels impossible, and then it doesn't. It feels like something that happens to other people, until it's happening to you. You are now at zero. Actually, you are below zero because the credit card debt hasn't gone anywhere. The medical bills haven't gone anywhere. The back taxes haven't gone anywhere. You went from a $100,000 cushion to a negative net worth inside of 2 years. And you didn't make reckless choices. You made human ones. The numbers that should terrify you. Let's look at this clearly, because the data paints a picture that most Americans can't afford to ignore. According to Empower's research, over 1 in 5 Americans, that's roughly 65 million people, have zero emergency savings right now. Not low savings, zero. The median emergency savings balance in America is just $500. More than a third of Americans say they can't cover an unexpected $1,000 expense without going into debt. And credit card delinquency rates are now at their highest point in more than a decade. These aren't abstract statistics. These are your neighbors, your coworkers, the family 2 doors down who always seemed fine. The system is designed in a way that turns even careful, responsible people into casualties. Because one bad year, one medical event, one job loss can undo a decade of discipline. The way back is real, but it's harder than anyone admits. The good news, and there genuinely is good news, is that none of these levels is a permanent sentence. People rebuild. People come back. But rebuilding requires something most financial advice doesn't bother to acknowledge. You have to rebuild the mindset before you can rebuild the money. The people who come back from zero don't just change their habits. They change the way they think about security. They stop treating savings as a comfort blanket and start treating it as infrastructure. They build multiple income streams before they need them. They keep emergency funds in high-yield accounts, separate from spending money, so the temptation to dip in doesn't exist. Because the crisis isn't really about money. The crisis is about what happens when your system has no slack, no buffer, no margin for error, and then life calls in a favor. The people who survive level 7 and rebuild aren't lucky. They're deliberate. They saw the same cracks that everyone else saw, and instead of ignoring them, they fixed the wall. Here's what I want you to sit with today. If you're somewhere between level 1 and level 3 right now, if things feel mostly fine but a little tighter than you'd like, that is the moment to act. Not when you're at level 6, not when the bank is calling. Now. Because the gap between $100,000 in savings and zero isn't a chasm. It's a hallway. And you walk through it faster than you think. Which level do you think most Americans are secretly sitting at right now? Drop your honest answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. And if this hit close to home or opened your eyes, hit that like button. It takes 2 seconds and it helps more people find this video before they need it. Share this with someone in your life who needs to see it. A friend, a sibling, a coworker who seems a little too comfortable right now. And subscribe, because we cover exactly this kind of thing every week. The money conversations nobody else is having. I'll see you in the next one.